fundamentally, just because, Kickstarter, even though it has these like labels and markets itself, it runs exactly the same as any other corporation, which the fundamental logic of it is that the company makes profits for the major shareholders, and the top executives off the backs of the labor of its workers. For a while, the tech industry was maybe sort of positioning itself politically as a little bit more progressive in some ways. But as soon as that stopped serving them, they immediately, turned heel.
You want to see what real independent journalism funded by the people for the people looks like?
You ever heard a story like this in America?
You're looking at it.
Congratulations for always being somewhere where mainstream media is not.
Flint, Michigan.
See you in Nevada.
Thanks to people like you, we can get the truth. Corporate media, they've been lying to us for years, and you go straight to the people.
You are the man. I'm glad you're here.
For as low as 16 cents a day, you'll keep us on the ground, covering the important stories the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Joan Wright. You are a worker at Kickstarter and a rank and file member of the union. There's a lot of hourly crises going on in America, and it's kind of hard to be on offense if you are a worker, because we all feel like we're on defense. But for those that don't know, Kickstarter is actually basically the first unionized company in the tech industry. And you've been on strike for going on a month now.
So our union of workers, so I'm a rank and file member of OPEIU 153 and Kickstarter United, which is our shop and our unit is it is a fairly small company, all things considered, because it is a business that has revenue in the tens of millions, but it has less than 100 employees. Our union, which, as you said, was the first American tech company to unionize, which is enormous. It's an enormous victory to win a union really anywhere, but also in a new industry is an enormous victory. And our union includes 59 workers like myself who provide a range of services to the people who use the platform. There's a level of executives, and then there's the owners that we're currently fighting to win our second contract. But fundamentally, right, that this platform that is fairly big, it provides a big service, it makes a lot of money, it's a fairly successful company, runs off the back of the labor of the workers who are actually running the platform and operating it and maintaining it.
And also, I've noticed over the years that a lot of big YouTube channels have used Kickstarters that actually are independent and aren't, taking money from corporate vampires. So Kickstarter's been used for media and other industries. So let's talk about, because the gap, like in the auto industry, like in retail, quite wide between your bosses there, the investors and the workers. Let's talk about what are the conditions that you guys are fighting for, the demands, and tell us about kind of the discrepancy between the rank and file workers and how much you are making versus, obviously the overlords at the top. Because one of the main demands, which I agree with, is a 32-hour work week at the pay rate.
Right now, we're fighting for our second contract. And we're going on the offensive with pretty bold demands. One is, like you said, a 32-hour work week. But the other is just livable wages for all of our workers. And so, like I said before, Kickstarter is a very successful company. It's not like a new startup that is, running on debt. It actually is fairly successful. I think, as you said, right, it actually has a fairly sizable cultural impact. Even like a lot of people know about it. It harnesses the power of private enterprise to create public benefit. That's sort of what they market themselves as. That's what the people who, the executives and the founders, that's what Kickstarter is for. And in addition to that, they also decided to become a B corporation, which is sort of this, designation that says that the business exists to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. And so that's one of the ways that they market themselves, right? And they actually really go on, the CEO will go on these public media campaigns and tours and say, I'm a CEO of this important public benefit company. But fundamentally, none of these like labels or designations change the fact that Kickstarter runs just exactly the same as any other corporation under capitalism. I also, I'm a tech worker. I've worked at small companies, startups, and even like big tech companies. I used to work at Amazon even. And fundamentally, just because Kickstarter, even though it has these like labels and markets itself, it runs exactly the same as any other corporation. Which the fundamental logic of it is that the company makes profits for the major shareholders and the top executives off the backs of the labor of its workers.
And it should not go unsaid. This is not surprising, particularly at Kickstarter, because we were talking about the shareholders. Well, Kickstarter got $100 million from Andreessen Horowitz. That would be Mark Andreessen. I think he's a billionaire, tech, Silicon Valley billionaire, and he infamous major Trump donor also. But he said some really, I think, fascist stuff a couple months ago in an interview about how democracy is fake and we should just have an oligarchy. Let me play some of that.
We always end up being ruled by the elites of some kind. Can you explain this law, this idea?
So this comes from a Italian political philosopher from about 100 years ago named Robert. I'm going to mangle let you pronounce the Italian, Michel's or Michael's. And then I learned about it through a famous book on politics, probably the best book on politics written in the 20th century, called The Machiavellians by this guy, James Burnham, who has had a big impact on me. But in The Machiavellians, he resurrects what he calls the sort of Italian realist school of political philosophy from the 10s and 20s. And these were people, to be clear, this was not like a Mussolini thing. These were people who were trying to understand the actual mechanics of how politics actually works. So to get to the actual sort of mechanical substance of like how the political machine operates. And this guy Michel's had this concept he ended up with called the iron law of oligarchy. And so what the iron law of oligarchy, and I mean, take a step back to say what he meant by oligarchy, because it has multiple meanings. So basically, in classic political theory, there's basically three forms of government at core. There's democracy, which is rule of the many. There's oligarchy, which is rule of the few. And there's monarchy, which is rule of the one. Just a mechanical observation, without even saying which one's good or bad, just a structural observation. And so the question that Michel's asked was like, is there such a thing as democracy? Like, is there actually such a thing as democracy? Is there ever actually like direct government? And what he did was he mounted this sort of incredible historical exploration of whether democracies had ever existed in the world. And the answer basically is almost never. And we could talk about that. But the other thing he did was he sought out the most democratic private organization in the world that he could find at that point, which he concluded was some basically communist German auto workers union that was like wholly devoted to the workers of the world uniting, back when that was like the hot thing. And he went in there and he's like, okay, this is the organization out of all organizations on planet Earth that must be operating as a direct democracy. And he went in there and he's like, oh, nope, there's a leadership class. There's like 6 guys at the top and they control everything. And then they lead the rest of the membership along, by the nose, which is, of course, the story of every union. The story of every union is always the story of, there's a Jimmy Hoffa in there, kind of running the thing.
So it goes on like that. It's a long clip, but I thought it was instructive because he sure seems to really admire whatever classical models he's referring to there of just kind of, I don't know, dictatorships, monarchy, oligarchy. This is who just poured in $100 million to a company whose mission statement, as you said, seems to be about the public good.
Yeah, and the tech, there's a lot to say about that clip. I mean, it's honestly pretty, whenever you hear any of these like, disgustingly rich people speak, they sound like they're in a completely different world than us. These people are so removed from the lives of working class people that the way they get to these perspectives is just so strange. But ultimately, right, I think it makes, in a certain sense, it makes a lot of sense. Like, he is a billionaire. He is, when we talk about capitalism, like that's one of these people, in the sort of inner circle who are throwing massive amounts of cash around, impacting all of our lives as working class people, the entire economy, right? It's just sort of like a playground for them because they can just throw $100 million. Some of the around just to sort of serve their political interests. And, especially sort of this ongoing uh, move towards the right wing in tech billionaires and the tech industry, sort of like titans who like run it. For a while, the tech industry was maybe sort of positioning itself politically as a little bit more progressive in some ways. But as soon as that stopped serving them, they immediately, turned heel and walked right down the other path. And now we're seeing actually a lot of these tech tech capitalists embracing the right wing mercenary politics of just a corporation throwing millions of dollars to whatever political candidate sort of seems to
Right.
suit their interests best. Like this actual pretty clear embrace of right wing politics, and I think especially in that clip, the sort of anti-union hostility. And so, not only is Kickstarter the company taking in $100 million from like pretty disgusting person like Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. But they are also not as a just sort of, again, not just sort of say it's just sort of this like mercenary maneuver where they're just sort of, using Ben Horowitz's, or sorry, Mark Andreessen's money just, to help themselves out. They're actually using the exact same union busting playbook as any other corporation, right? They are a company that is embracing not this sort of public benefit corporation image that they try to stoke, but rather they are actually using the same union busting playbook. They are absolutely anti-union as any other corporation. During our strike and our fight for our contract, Kickstarter management has actually hired the notorious union busting law firm Littler Mendelson. It's the same union busting law firm that's used by Amazon and Starbucks, which I'm sure everyone knows. Like or even if they don't know the specifics, I mean, can sort of intuit the like absolutely brutal union busting campaigns that both those corporations have launched. They're using the exact same law firm that Kickstarter using the exact same law firm and union busting playbook as them. And this isn't even just in our current strike. During the initial union drive, which happened in 2020, a few years ago, Kickstarter management launched a brutal union busting campaign and they fired union organizers. And that's the sort of context in which I would say probably the management of Kickstarter would say, well, we don't agree with Mark Andreessen. Like, oh yeah, they'd probably want to distance themselves from sort of this more like absolute, open-faced right-wing political rhetoric. But behind the scenes, they take his money. They take other venture fund money who are also moving in the right wing and donating to Trump PACs, and then they act in the exact same way, right? They act the exact same way as any other union busting corporation under capitalism.
And where do things stand now? Because obviously you've been on strike for about 4 weeks. They're union busting. Do we have picket lines? Obviously every strike is different. Is there mutual aid kind of happening? And what kind of threats is the company making to you if you remain on strike?
Yeah. So, I think to sort of, talk a little bit more about how the strike is going. I think it is enormously positive that any group of workers takes the sort of somewhat risky, scary step of going on strike, especially in a industry that is so anti-union and non-unionized as a tech industry. And so we don't have like a physical place for us to picket to sort of like a physical like street corner or like a building where we could form a picket line physically and not just demonstrate that we're out on strike, but also sort of a picket line that also tells people who are using the platform, who are using the business, to stand with workers. That doesn't exist for us. What we have done, and successfully, and I think really positively, we have been able to hold really successful rallies in several cities. So we're not even also, in addition to being remote workers, we are kind of spread out throughout the country. So we have some density in a couple cities. And so we held some really successful rallies in Seattle, in New York, and in Boston. I'm based here in Seattle, and I'm also a member of Workers Strike Back. And with Workers Strike Back, we held a fairly successful rally here with other tech unions, with other unions here in the city, to fight for our union, to build the profile of our strike, to build the profile of what we're fighting for, because that's going to be absolutely necessary. We're currently under attack, all of us as workers and members of the working class, regardless of if you're, a Starbucks worker who's fighting for a union, or if you're a tech worker working at Amazon that's getting laid off, or if you're a federal worker that's getting laid off, or if you're, you're a struggling someone on disability who relies on SNAP benefits right now, and that's getting taken away from you. All of these things are related, and what it's going to take is a militant fight back to win these demands. And so what we call on for our strike at Kickstarter would be that we need the labor movement, and this means like the international leadership of our union, OPEIU. It means, we're a part of the AFL-CIO. We need the leadership of those broad, big organizations to call for offensive demands, to give working class people something to fight for, and show people that we can actually go on the offensive. We can fight for real things. We can win things for working class people, because regardless of a small shop like ours winning a union and going on strike, right, where there's always going to be a function of how organized and the strength of the wider working class as well, which is also why I'm a member of Workers Strike Back. That's a member, and why I'm also a member of Revolutionary Workers, is because I think that broader organization is absolutely crucial.
Thank you so much, Joan. We'll have to stay in touch to see developments. It's not easy, whether you have a storefront or you're full remote. To go on strike comes with risks, especially for working class people, especially in this AI apocalypse that we're dealing with. So we'll definitely stay on this and try to spread the word.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.